Welcome everyone. So you can choose to have your camera on or off. If you're comfortable with your camera on, it helps me feel engaged because I'm talking to other human beings as opposed to blank screens. Oh, I see all sorts of familiar people. Hi, Kyle. Lots of friends. Hi, Diane. Oh my gosh. This is like Sesame Street. This is your life. Exciting. And Michelle. Okay, we'll get going. My name is Penny Pop, and I'm going to be hosting your webinar today on the Written Communications Badge. My email address is here. If you have questions after the class, you're welcome to reach out. If you have questions about the content, you're going to use my email address to find out the specifics about the course or any of the badges. In terms of technical issues today, programming, registration for programs or badges, you're going to use the contact details at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any issues with the webinar today, please reach out to Student Services. We also have Student Services on the webinar. So if anything goes astray, they can help us out with technical stuff. If you find that your system is glitching or freezing, shutting down all programs in the background and taking your devices off the shared network can help improve your connectivity. What we're going to do today, just so you know, this is being recorded as well. We're going to chat for about half to 3/4 of the time on the webinar while it's recorded. And then at that point, we'll stop and we'll go into question and answer period where you guys can ask questions or seek any sort of information about the programs or the badges. If you have questions as we go, you're welcome to start typing them into the chat so you don't forget them along the way. What we will do is use Slido at the end so you can enter your questions anonymously as well. So I won't be looking at any of the questions during the webinar. I'll look at those at the end when we turn the recording off, and I'll share with you the Slido code at the end. So if you want to just jot down your questions or put them in chat to keep them, you're welcome to do that. The slides will not be made available to you, so I encourage you to take notes. If you would like, the webinar recording will be available in about 48 hours on the Center for Continuing Education's website. So you can go back and review it if you choose afterwards. I'm going to start by acknowledging that the University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Nahiawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis-Michif Nation. The University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. Just to also chat about participating in the reconciliation by increasing our own personal understanding, I wanted to recommend to you folks some really good books that are available. Part of the Truth and Reconciliation's call for actions is that we also understand the issues that prompted some of the challenges that Indigenous people are facing today. This book here is a really good one. I haven't finished it. No Surrender, The Land Remains Indigenous. The book I most recently finished is called Clearing the Plains and is written by somebody that works at the University of Regina. So it's also a great resource. It's a bit academic to start. It can feel a little bit dry in the beginning. That's the Clearing the Plains book. It gets really good partway through and has amazing insights and knowledge if you're looking to increase your own personal awareness of Indigenous issues. This is my information. If you like playing with technology, you can hold your camera phone up to the QR code just for fun, no other reason. And you can join me on LinkedIn or follow me. This is my email address and some credentials that possibly mean nothing to you, but just to demonstrate I have some clue what I'm doing. That's really all this slide means. So we're going to move past that very quickly. You can find me on LinkedIn if you're interested. This is today's agenda. So we're going to talk about what is a badge so you understand what it is you would achieve if you registered in one of our badges at CCE. What is a microcredential? We're going to talk about other programs and professional certificates and seminars that CCE offers. Then we'll get into a preview of some of the content that you'll have within this particular badge. And we'll do an overview of the badge, and then we'll get into our question period. If you have any programming or registration inquiries, remember the phone number and the email address at the bottom of the screen is how you're going to get those questions answered. We have a whole host of badges at CCE. Interesting fact, on August 10th of this year, CCE announced that they were the first Canadian university to issue micro badges in Canada. And so that is registered through the Canadian National Association of Registrars. What these badges are official verified demonstrations that you have spent time in a focused area of study and that you have practiced in a specific area. Why are people getting these badges? What this does is it helps verify skill sets that you may be looking to upskill, reskill, or boost yourself in. They're conducted over 14 hours. 9 of those hours are synchronous, meaning we come together, the facilitators and the students, for 3 hours, 3 days in a row. Plus there's work or pre-reading, etc., that you might do outside of that, so that you demonstrate you've conducted 14 hours of study in any of these areas. There's lots of badges to choose from at the University of Regina. This is just some of the badges. So you can see there's something for everyone in terms of badges. And there's no prerequisites required. That's the great part. Anyone qualifies to come increase their knowledge and expertise in any of these badges and areas. And so the other great thing that happens in terms of the badges, when you've achieved 3 badges in a specific area, you qualify to have a micro-credential, which is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So these badges are stackable. Over 2 years, if you complete 3 specific ones, you will achieve your micro-credential. This gives you focused learning and demonstrates to employers, colleagues, wherever you choose to display it, that you have a specialized knowledge and expertise in a narrow range of competencies. What you can use this for is students can use this in industry to get recognized. Employees can use this to upskill, reskill, and boost skills. Job seekers can demonstrate that they have competency and knowledge in a specific area. And businesses and industries can invest in professional development for their employees. These are the current micro-credentials, just a small smattering of what the University of Regina offers. There's quite a few. I encourage you to go online and see what all the options are and what suits you. Of course, I've highlighted here the business communications micro-credential because that's the one we're going to talk about in more detail today, and specifically the written communications badge. The other 2 badges that comprise this micro-credential are the facilitation and consensus building and the presentation and public speaking. Other micro-credentials you can earn is the responsive management micro-credential, the high impact leadership one, which has a lot of uptake right now. And there's also project management, and we have a specialized business essentials badge that might be of interest to you. And just to give you an idea of what CCE offers, micro-credentials are the newest offering to help meet needs of professionals and people that are out there looking to gain knowledge and skills in specific areas. In addition to that, we also have professional certificates, programs, and seminars. And so if you focus on the right-hand side of the screen, we've talked about badges and the micro-credentials. It shows a comparison of what you would do or what you would accomplish in your professional certificate. And so that's a verified learning experience with concepts reinforced over a series of courses. It's typically 7 courses over several months or up to 3 years to obtain your certificate. Now, while that's if you have a goal to get a post-secondary certificate, any of those courses are available to take as one-off seminars as well. And if you choose to come back in the future, if it's within those 3 years, you can work towards your certificate. So we're going to get into our preview of the course now. So I'm going to dive right into our badge, written communications badge. I have this quote here. In 2021, a survey by Adobe found that people in the workplace spend on average 3.1 hours per day on emails alone, a shocking 20 full weeks of the year. Just to put it in perspective, that's on average. Some of us spend more than that. This doesn't take into account personal message. This doesn't take into account emails that we may do for taking care of our household, etc. All involve written communications. What this tells us is written communications are often consuming us in the workplace, particularly since we've shifted to some hybrid and some remote work options. It's become vastly more important how we communicate in writing. Oftentimes those communications might not be clear, or we're not clear what the purpose is. If you've ever gotten an email, you're not sure what's being asked of you or if something's being asked of you. We want to strive to make sure that our writing is clearer, more concise, and conveys purpose so that people can spend their time doing things that matter as opposed to wading through their sea of emails. What we want to do is mitigate frustrations, wasted time, and rework that can arise from emails. And if you've ever been part of mass email chains, you'll know this to be true, or you've ever had the privilege of somebody accidentally hitting reply all and the insanity that ensues with 70 people letting that person know they hit reply all, and then those people jumping on and letting those people know they also hit reply all. Communications can spread rapidly. And so we want to think about how we can be more intentional with how we communicate so that we get results and we come to the workplace with a professional presence about us. And so with the course, my mission is to show people how to improve and how to have a simple process to improve their written communications so they can have impact in all they do. So what we want to keep in mind, people are always communicating. The meaning intended will never be exactly the same as what the recipient perceives it to be. What we can do as writers is strive to increase the chances that the receiver will interpret our messages in a way that counts and conveys the meaning that we intended. One of the things we will do is try to overcome barriers by identifying them and paying attention to what those may be, so we can try to remove those in our written communications. In the class, we'll study 4 primary obstacles that come up for us in writing, and we'll practice steps on how we can overcome those in a way that makes sure that we communicate clearly and we bring clarity to what we're doing. One of the things we spend time on in the course as well is defining very well and being very clear on what our roles are and what we are experts in. And what this does is it helps us understand what our own purpose is in terms of our written communication. This almost immediately improves how we show up and how we write our written communications. So we're going to spend time, especially if we're subject matter experts or we have very detailed technical expertise. We sometimes forget that our written communications are about the audience and the audience receiving them, not about ourselves and all the many information that we want to share with people and tell people that we know. We can get lost in a sea of written communication when we forget to consider the audience. So one of the other things we'll think about, and I'm going to show you an example, is if we want people to pay attention to our written work, if we want it to have meaning and they understand it and they can take that information and remember it and use it, that means we have impact and what we've written matters and has added value to our organizations or our relationships and communication. And so we consider how people learn, and the process of people learning, breaking it down into simple terms, is we pay attention to something and then we encode it, which means we have a way of attaching it to previous knowledge or to a memory or an analogy, and then we're able to store it. So we have to go through these steps of paying attention, encoding, and then storing it so that we can retrieve it and use that information. If you've ever read a book and you have no idea what you've read, you have to go back and reread. That's because we're not paying attention. It's a simple concept. What I want you guys to think about, even if you don't come to the class, these are your takeaways here in the preview, is how can you utilize these 4 mechanisms to ensure that people pay attention to the right thing when we draft our written communication? What can you do as the writer to help them encode the information so that they can potentially store it and then retrieve it at a later time? And attention is a process of selection, and it's what we pay attention to, we learn. And so we're going to study that to understand how we help people pay attention to specific points or specific data, information, so they can receive that communication and know what they should do with it. And I want to show you an example of attention and encoding. So we're going to watch this video. Hopefully you'll all pay attention. I gotta say hi to Carlin real quick. Hi, Carlin. So let's watch this video and then we'll chat about why it's attention and encoding.
The monkey business illusion.
Can you hear it?
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events. And that's the monkey business illusion.
So that's an example of attention and encoding. If you didn't notice the monkey, it's because your attention was directed elsewhere. If you did know about the monkey or you were able to see it, did you know about the curtain or did you know about the other player leaving? And chances are, if you have already seen this video, you very quickly remembered that there's a monkey in there. And we start to look for that because it's already been encoded for us. So this is an example of attention and encoding. And we can use these principles and mechanisms in our written communications and how we write information and share information and our expertise so that people can retain it. They know what to pay attention to. They're able to encode it, and then they eventually can store it and retrieve that information. And it's what we pay attention to, we learn. And oftentimes when we are experts or we're subject matter experts or technical professionals, there's an element of us having to teach people what we do in order for them to understand, make decisions, take action, respond to us in a way that's meaningful. So we want to think about these principles of how human beings learn and retain information. In class, we'll also talk about mechanisms and strategies. How can we increase the probability that people will retain past knowledge? If you've ever had to communicate with leaders or executive or decision makers, etc., and you've gone away feeling frustrated, like I've told them this, why do I have to keep telling them? We can decide how we want to reframe that and communicate in writing in a way that helps them retain that information, and strategies on how we can help people remember so we can be more impactful. And when people understand the base levels, we can start to layer more information on. We get richer communications in our organizations that way. So communications, we all know this, they fail when we don't consider how others will respond. So the process that we use in order to dissect communications and how we approach our communications, I call the ACE method. It's called the ACE method. So this is a way for us to plan with intention how we're going to communicate before we even put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. So what we're going to do within the badge is we go through each of the items you see here on the screen. So starting with analyze, we determine the purpose and the outcome we're looking for in our communications. We consider very closely who the audience is, and I'm going to show you guys a sneak preview of those two. Then we determine info sharing or the need for persuasion. So how do we need to communicate? Is there a need to persuade? If you think in terms of an email, just sharing information that's run of the mill versus an email that has news that's going to be untoward and possibly disrupt people, there may be a need for persuasion. So we go through those metrics as well, and determining what's the most appropriate medium or venue for our written communications. Then we go into composing. So we're going to break down the process and dissect it, where we spend a lot of time planning what we write before we even write, and doing some pre-work before we start drafting our messages. What this does is it helps us think really critically about how we're going to communicate. And when we develop that habit, it starts to come very naturally. Our communications will automatically become more effective. When we compose, we're going to talk about how to make our content organized and understandable. Make sure we have a professional image in how we communicate in our writing. And is our message delivery effective? So are we going to get the purpose and outcome that we determine at the start once we've composed our message? At the end, we're going to evaluate. So 3 steps. This is where we're going to go back again. We're going to check if our outcome and purpose has been achieved again, always keeping that front of mind so that we make sure that we get more concise in what we include in our written communications. Revising, editing, proofreading, practice receiving the information from the audience's perspective. And is there a more effective way to deliver the message? So at this point, you can imagine we've put in a lot of work on how we've crafted our written communications. We have to be willing to decide if we're going to achieve that outcome. If anyone's ever written a huge document, you get to the bottom and you start to realize this isn't going to work and we have to start over again. We're going to talk about mechanisms on how to mitigate that issue. So in terms of analyze, let's take a little look at what we can do. Analyzing the purpose focuses the message, and we start by asking ourselves, what is the reason for our communication? Plain and simple, before you start your written communications, you can jot down the purpose. Just have a scrap piece of paper, write your purpose for your communication. This is going to help you get more clear and more concise and decide what goes in and out of the message. But purpose statements are not enough. We also want to identify the desired outcome. So we're going to also ask ourselves and jot down on a piece of paper our outcome. What is the outcome you want to achieve? And I'm going to show you guys an example. We have here a purpose statement. So if we were about to broach this topic with a client, we jot down our purpose statement. We want to notify our client that we are unable to take on a new project right now. And here's our draft of our communication. Thank you for contacting us. We are fully booked right now and cannot meet your schedule. We are grateful that you thought of us and look forward to working with you in the future. Everyone agree that we achieved the purpose? If you disagree, speak now. Feel free to come off mute. How is this different? If we have an outcome that the client will postpone the project rather than hiring someone else to do it, this looks completely different. So when we read our first draft, thank you for contacting us. We're fully booked right now and cannot meet your schedule. We're grateful that you thought of us and look forward to working with you in the future. Everyone agree that we meet our purpose, but do we meet the outcome? I would venture to say no. So it's a different way of approaching our written communications when we consider both purpose and outcome. And you all can start this right away. It can be used as simply as in emails. Think about what your purpose is for drafting each email, what the outcome is. What do you want the receiver to do? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to say? How do you want them to respond when they receive that written communication? And if you have that outcome really well laid out, you're going to get different results with your communications. So here's the draft I would propose. Thank you for contacting us about your new project. We are confident we can do an outstanding job because we've worked with you so closely in the past. However, we are fully booked until November. If you are able to postpone your project for 6 weeks, we can provide you with our top marketing team. We will be glad to extend a discount on this project to acknowledge your patience. Do you guys agree that we would achieve the outcome this way? It's different how we show up and write. Thank you, whoever's off mute, I love it. Engagement is encouraged. Feel free to join in. So what you want to think about, purpose and outcome. This is something you can take away right away and start practicing. The next step is we want to analyze the audience, and this helps you meet their needs. So we have needs, our purpose and an outcome, but communication is not a one-way street. We're going to consider the person receiving the communication as well. And this is going to drastically change how you communicate. Thinking about who the audience is going to help you frame the communications in a way that they can receive it, understand it, and have enough information within that communication to take action or understand what you're trying to convey. Two things we want to think about, not just the audience receiving it, the primary and secondary. And why is this important? Primary is the direct recipient of our written communication. So that's our direct recipient of our communication. Oftentimes, people we communicate with have a need to use our information, or they may share our information, or our information could end up with somebody else. What we want to contemplate, who is the audience of the primary audience, or who else may receive our communication or even be impacted by our communication. So we can think of secondary audiences those three ways. Who is the audience of our primary? Who else may receive the communication? Or who else may be impacted by what we're communicating? And when you think with those two audiences in mind, going back to the purpose and outcome, now we draft our message. And we draft our message considering how much knowledge they have, how much history they know about this, what is their understanding, their education, their expertise in this area, and we start to communicate in a different way. So we're taking ourselves out of being the center of the communication and placing the audience in the center of the communication and doing this for them. And it helps us become more concise. We can communicate at a level and in a way that's clear so that they can understand and receive that communication. And it's going to improve the likelihood that they will understand, pay attention to it, and be able to encode it, which helps them store that information and retrieve it. So what we want to think about, and this, you can take this away right now and start practicing, you always want to jot out your purpose, your outcome, your primary audience, and your secondary audience. If you have to persuade, a quick trick in order to make sure you're being persuasive in your communications is jot out ahead of time as well 3 benefits for each of these audiences and anticipate any objections either of these audiences may have to your communication. So I'll repeat that. You're going to jot down, if you think you need to use persuasion, 3 benefits for each of these and anticipate what they won't like about your communication or what might be difficult for them to receive. And then we can use all of these notes. So you're going to have a jot sheet with your purpose, your outcome, both audiences, benefits, anticipated objections. And now we can go back to this like a roadmap and make sure we include this information and consider it in our written communication. It will help you get more clear, more concise, and drastically increase your ability to succeed in how you communicate. So we're going to look now, that's just a preview of what we do and analyze, and we'll go through each of these steps. In class, we'll also practice writing, but don't be dismayed. We used fun examples. It's not dry. There's no Triscuit on a hot day with my classes. So if any of you have been there before, we'd like to spice it up and make sure that it's really fun and engaging so we can stay awake for all those days. So what we'll do is practice a lot of examples and share information in order to get better within our written skills. So then we get to actually composing. You've got your little jot notes, you have an idea and a plan of where you're going to go, and now we're going to go there with our composing. What can happen to us in this stage? The biggest issue is writer's block. That's my guy, Oscar. But his outside voice conveys my inside voice when I get writer's block. So there was no better stock picture than this. So in terms of writer's block, this can hit any of us. If you've never experienced it, I applaud you. That's fantastic. During class, you can have a coffee and gloat over the rest of us. But for most of us, at some point or another, we will feel we can't get the words out, or we can't get them in the right order. We're just not hitting the purpose or outcome. And it can start to wear you down and you can feel tired and discouraged. So what we want to think about is, why is this happening? And what each of us will do individually in the class is go through a process where we can assess what works for us and what doesn't. And then what we want to do is replicate those conditions that work so that we increase the chances of us being successful when it is time to write, but we'll also develop individual strategies, each of us, so that if we find ourselves inside of writer's block or it's starting to creep up, we're going to get our strategy, we're going to implement that strategy to help move ourselves through that so that we can be more productive when those situations come up. And writer's block can happen for a number of reasons. That's part of us kind of understanding. Each of us is unique, so it's hard to say what causes it for each of us, but we'll look in detail what those individual issues are for all of us. It might come from not knowing where to start or having too many ideas, and we don't know how to put them down on paper, or we don't know where to start. And we'll work through that. Sometimes we have the bulk of our written assignment done, but then we get to the end and we find we've gone in the wrong direction, or we get feedback that stonewalls us, or additional direction that can feel discouraging after you've spent a lot of time on something. So we'll talk about how to get through that. Deadlines can put pressure on us, and depending on who your reader is, that can also increase the likelihood that you have writer's block. People in high profile positions, or somebody that has, historically been very critical of your writing, when we know that they're part of the audience, either primary or secondary, that can start to impact our ability to move through that period without a lot of stress. So we'll work on writer's block. And what we'll do is we'll think about actual physical conditions as well as other considerations that are happening in terms of writer's block. So we need to know truly what distracts us, and we'll go through a process so that we can identify that clearly, and then we can develop strategies for each of us to move through that and eliminate those distractions, whether they be imagined or real, physical. It can be a past lens in your experience in your written communications, but we work through how to move through those issues that show up for us. And we'll each design our own unique solution so that we have that roadmap we can take back with us, and we can take that off the shelf if we find ourselves in those situations where we're struggling to get started, we're struggling at some place. And it breaks it down into really simple steps so that all of us can overcome that in a way that gets us productive much quicker. So that's the big one with Compose that I'll share with you. There's a lot in Compose to share. So in a 1-hour webinar, I thought that might be the most bang for your buck, to know that writer's block is normal and it catches us. Most of us can write very well. It's just when we get stumped, it becomes a problem. And after we've written something, we have a draft, we have that first kind of look at what our work looks like. We're going to go back and we're going to evaluate. You can see here, we go back to the outcome again. So that's why it's so important to have that purpose and that outcome, which are closely tied to your audience. So we want to have those things in front of us at all times, asking ourselves repetitively, does this achieve my purpose, my outcome? Does it meet the needs of the audience? How will the audience receive this? That's going to improve how clear and concise we are. We're going to revise, edit, proofread, practice receiving the information, putting ourselves in their shoes, checking if our desired outcome's been achieved, and reevaluating and being open to if there's a more effective way to deliver the message. And that can look a few different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to start from scratch. So some of the things we'll look at, the basics for sure. For some of us, this will be easy peasy. I have recently just worked with somebody who had their master's in English. I found that a little bit overwhelming to work with them. And so in terms of writer's block, mine was through the roof. They gave me great feedback, so I feel confident in the skills I can share with you guys. They loved everything that I produced for them. And so it turned out really good, but I'm telling you, I had writer's block and I couldn't even figure out, this person actually reached out to me and asked me to write something for them. And I found that very overwhelming. So I did it, it was a success, amazing experience. But we'll look at some basics just to sharpen our saws, because not everybody has the basics down pat, and all of us can get better at this. Got this funny little character here, fonts matter. Even something like that we're going to consider. Oftentimes when we get into the weeds of our written work, we lose sight. And what can happen is there's little mistakes, there's little nuances that we miss because we've been in the written work so long, or we write it in the conversational voice that we have in our head. And so we'll talk about techniques to mitigate against some of those really easy issues that can pop up, and how we can just take our writing to the next level. So how can we bedazzle it in a way that it's really good and it has perfection on those things that are easy wins. As subject matter experts or technical experts, when we deliver our work, we're oftentimes asking people to trust our expertise and trust that we know what we're doing. So if you have spelling errors in that work, it starts to erode at your credibility and trust, even if the reader or the audience isn't consciously aware of it. When we see spelling errors and mistakes, and I sure hope there's none in today's presentation, but feel free to tell me at the end if there is. When we see mistakes such as that, it starts to bring into question and we start to judge the source. And so we want to make sure we're very particular at some of these things that are a little bit detailed, but we'll talk about how we can make that easier on ourselves to make sure that we catch those. So font styles, how we present visually, grammar, capitalization, punctuation, citations, references. The good news is I'm inherently a very lazy person. So I have tips and tricks to make all of this really easy. So it's not difficult, even citations and references. There's lots of resources out there that can make this easy for us. Presenting data, options, and analysis, how to do it in a way where it has impact and it pops and people pay attention to what we have to say. And when do we want to use data graphics and images, things like bullets? When would we ever indent certain areas? These sorts of things matter. And so we'll talk about where we can implement those things to take our writing to the next level. As well, we talk about document structure, different documents or formats that you may come across at work, and how we structure those and the basics of what those look like. This one is one I'll share with you because it's the quickest, easiest thing you can do to improve your writing as soon as you leave here today. And lots of you may already know this, but I'm going to share it anyways, even if there's one of you that don't. If we're inside a Word document and this is on a Windows machine, I've got these snapshots. If you're on an Apple machine, it's slightly different, but I'll show you Windows. Most workplaces use Windows, so that's why I use this one. You're going to go to File and you're going to click Options. And then what you're going to do, so this, first of all, sorry, I should clarify, you will type something into a Word document. So you guys can go do this on your screen right now to practice if you'd like. So just type a sentence into your Word document, then you're going to click File Options, and then we're going to go to Proofing. I'll just leave that for a second so you guys can follow me. Then we go to Proofing. And down at the bottom, we have Show Readability Statistics right down here. Show Readability Statistics. And this beautiful little checkbox is a gift from the Greek gods to me. Here's what it does. It shows us how easy our written work is to read, or the ability for others to interpret it. Now, it's got some barriers, which I'll explain to you because we can't use it blindly. Technology has its limitations. What we're looking at, and in order to get this printout, you would run a spell check. So you want to make sure that this one's checked. You're going to go through the motions, make sure your readability statistics are checked. Next time you run a spell check, you will get a printout such as this. And what we're going to pay attention to is the flesh reading ease, which we want to aim for 60 to 70%, and higher is better. That means it's easier. The flesh Kincaid grade level we want to aim for is 8, because if we speak and explain things in terms of something that a grade 8 can understand, then everyone can understand. And especially subject matter experts and technical experts, we really like to use 4-syllable words so that people understand how smart we are. I like to say, if no one knows what you're saying, they don't know how smart you are. And now you made them feel dumb too. So nobody's really winning in that equation. So we want to learn to write in a way that everybody understands. And so aiming for a grade 8 level. Another thing I've heard before is speak so your grandmother understands. So we explain things exactly like a grade 8 will. And so you can see in my example that I've used, I am not hitting the mark. I've got 12 for my grade level and 24.4 for for my flush reading ease. Here's the limitations I want you to know about this tool. It is inherently faulty in that if you have a lot of, this is, I believe, 3-syllable words. So if I have university in there repeatedly, it will lower my scores. It will say that my reading is insufficient because there's too many 3-syllable words. So you want to just know that there's some words that are going to trigger it, that it says this is too much. But for the most part, rather than focus on the numbers, if that's the case, because sometimes we have to use the word university a lot, rather than focus on that, just see if you can alter it slightly and get your reading ease up a little bit and get your grade level down a little bit. And that'll even be a win for you in your writing. So this is an amazing tool you can go away and use right now. We all have it in our Word function. If you want to use it for your emails, you could copy and paste your emails into a Word document and check them real quick and then put them back into the email. So there's a little tip and trick for you guys.
Yeah, but it's not coming up that way.
Did it work? It sounds like someone's having trouble. Should I go back? I'll show you guys one more time. And it may depend on the version of Word you have. So if you're struggling, do a little Google. Every version of Word has this. So if it's giving you any sort of grief, we just need to kind of figure out what version you've got, but it's all got this. Whatever version I took screenshots, so more or less it's in file options. And then the most recent one I've seen is it's under proofing. And then wherever you've got your spell check, you want to check that show readability statistics. So wherever you can find that. So if you Google show readability statistics with your version of Word, you should probably get some step-by-step instructions on how to do that, if these don't suit your version. And then you're going to run a spell check in order to get this assessment. So you have to go through the whole spell check activity, and then it will give you this. Did anyone get it to work while we're here? On the, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that's the preview of the badge. I'll give you an overview. There's a lot, we can't get through all of it. But what we want to think about is our role as a writer, because we need to understand what's being asked of us in terms of when we write. If you have ever received written communication and you're thinking, is this that person's job? This happens all the time. So we're going to be really clear before we start on what our role is, especially subject matter experts and technical experts, so that we advise rather than decide. That's going to be an important principle we think about. We're going to have a simplified process for writing, thinking about using persuasion, and then we're going to practice using persuasion, look at forms of written communication, best practices, identifying and mitigating barriers. And so one of my goals is that you will actually come away from the class with a map that is unique and customized to you. So you will fill out your own map depending on what it is you require. And in terms of analyze, compose, and evaluate. So as issues come up in the class and we resolve them and you figure out that's something you want to work on or something that you've gotten feedback on that you require work on, you're going to note the mechanism within your personal map. And then that will become a reference guide for you at your desk or wherever your writing space is, so that you can start to implement those steps and those strategies and improve your writing right away. So that's what you'll get out of this. In terms of identifying and mitigating barriers, I also have barriers, and we'll talk about this in class. It's called bias. And so I have bias. I've been telling you the class and telling you how good it is, but let's see what other people say. So these are evaluations from students that have come on side and learned the process in terms of how to improve your written communications. And so what I can assure you is we will have fun in the class. We'll practice actual examples. You will come away with a map that you can use right away and keep at your desk as a reference document so that you can start to ingrain those habits. It's going to feel very mechanical. Everything we learn, if you've been in my classes, you know this, it's mechanical at first. We have to really think out purpose, outcome, audience, and it takes time and energy. But as we do that over and over, that repetition, we start to encode it. And then it just becomes storage and we retrieve it quickly. And pretty soon it becomes how we write. And we naturally show up and we write with a purpose and an outcome and an audience in mind. And we start to save time, we're more effective, and we show up in a way where we can be more professional and have impact in the work that we're sharing with others. So I have these books to recommend to you. It's super simple. This is all I could come up with. We're going to talk about how to use a thesaurus all the time. It's online. Don't buy one. We can get them online all the time now. And a dictionary. And this little beauty, Planning in Plain English. One of my favorite things. You know what else I like if you've been in my classes? Giant font, because that means I can read it and feel like a superstar in half a day. So this book's phenomenal. I strongly recommend you get it. If you don't, it's got examples. It is one of the best resources I've ever used. A previous student actually recommended this to us at the university. And so this is phenomenal. Why do I have Pride and Prejudice up there? I'll tell you why, because it is my favorite book of all time. And if you come learn to be more effective in written communications, you'll have more time to read stuff that matters and not communications that are confusing and unclear. So you can replace Pride and Prejudice with whatever your favorite book is, because it will increase your effectiveness and your ability to communicate in written communications. And it saves time, which is a huge deal for everyone. I want to share with you, if you're not familiar with the Center for Continuing Education at the University of Regina, it's a fabulous place. The building is phenomenal. I had the pleasure of being there this week and interacting with people in the public, and they too were astounded. Somebody actually said this week they didn't know about CCE until recently. It was their first experience. They couldn't believe the building, the food when we're back in person, and everything that goes along with the classes. So we have so much to offer. If you're interested in learning more, follow on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, whichever channel suits you. You can start to see more of what the university offers. And there's some amazing programs and certifications. You can also join the email list if you're interested in getting any sort of updates or new information about the programs that the university offers. I'm just going to ask Emma. Oh, I went over time. Shoot. I'm going to ask Emma to stop the recording and we'll shift into question period.